The lobby was quiet. It was just after 7:30 a.m. The kind of time when the city was still rubbing its eyes, not quite awake, not yet busy. The security desk at Blake and Carter's downtown headquarters sat empty except for the usual rotation of coffee cups, a desktop monitor with too many fingerprints, and Lewis, the guard on shift, mid-50s, graying hair, wide shoulders, and a habit of staring a little too long at anyone who didn't look like they belonged. That morning, he watched a tall black man approach the glass doors from the sidewalk, suit jacket slung over his shoulder. No briefcase, just a folded envelope in one hand, coffee in the other. Lewis squinted, didn't recognize him, didn't see a keycard, didn't see a name badge. He rose from the chair slowly, pushing the rolling wheels backward with a grunt. The man stepped inside, giving a polite nod as he moved toward the elevators. Calm, relaxed, not the way most job applicants looked. That set something off in Lewis's head. "Excuse me," Lewis said, stepping in front of him. The man stopped, still calm. "Yes. You got business in this building?" Lewis asked. His voice wasn't hostile, just firm, the kind of tone that could mean anything depending on how it landed. The man looked at him, expression unreadable. "I do," he said simply. Lewis didn't move. "You with a company?" The man gave a short nod. "Blake and Carter." Lewis frowned. "Which department?" There was a pause. Then the man replied, "Executive floor." Lewis blinked, not laughing but clearly not buying it. He stepped slightly closer. "You got ID?" "Not yet. Orientations this morning." "No ID, no badge, no escort?" Lewis said. "I'm gonna need to call someone." "That's fine," the man replied. No defensiveness, no sarcasm, just stillness. "Go ahead." Lewis walked back to the desk, picked up the phone, and started dialing the front office. The man just stood there, quiet, waiting. He didn't fidget. He didn't smile. He didn't push back. Just waited. And soon, someone would come downstairs, and Lewis's assumptions would collapse. Lewis tapped the number twice before realizing he'd dialed wrong. His fingers moved slower when he was unsure. He glanced up. The man was still standing by the elevator, hands at his sides, envelope tucked neatly beneath one arm, watching without watching. Finally, the line rang through. "Yeah, this is Lewis at the front desk," he said. "Got someone here, says he's with Blake and Carter. No badge, no escort. Claims he's going to the executive floor." A pause. "Yeah, black male. About 6 feet, no briefcase. Just standing here waiting." Another pause. Lewis's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice. "I just want to make sure he's where he says he's supposed to be." More silence. Then a tone shift on the other end. Sharper. Lewis's eyes flicked back to the man. He didn't look rattled, didn't shift, just stood there like he'd heard it all before. "Yes, ma'am," Lewis finally said. "I'll let him know." He hung up slowly, cleared his throat, walked back around the desk. "Someone from upstairs is coming down," he said. The man nodded once. "Appreciate it." Lewis stayed standing, arms crossed now, trying to figure him out. Maybe he worked for someone up there. An assistant, a consultant. The lobby stayed quiet. The coffee machine hissed once. A faint buzz from the elevator shaft. Then a soft ding. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped Rachel Kim, executive administrator to the CEO. Mid-30s, high heels, no nonsense. She spotted the man immediately. "Oh my God," she said, breaking into a relieved smile. "Mr. Harris, I'm so sorry. Traffic was a mess this morning. We were expecting you earlier." Lewis turned sharply toward her. "Wait," he said. "You know him?" Rachel gave him a look, then turned to the man again. "I hope he wasn't giving you trouble," she said, loud enough to carry. Mr. Harris smiled faintly. "Just a minor delay." Rachel turned back to Lewis. "This is Malcolm Harris, the new chief executive officer." Lewis didn't speak, didn't move, didn't blink. The realization hit like cold water. Harris turned slightly, meeting Lewis's eyes for the first time since he'd stepped inside. "I believe orientation starts on the 14th floor?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, sir. Right this way." They walked toward the elevators. Harris calm, Rachel composed. Lewis standing by the desk, his posture suddenly unsure. The doors closed behind them. The lobby was quiet again, but not in the same way. The quiet this time had weight. The ride to the 14th floor was silent. Rachel didn't try to fill the space with chatter. She knew better. She'd seen this expression before. Composed, steady, but with something coiled beneath it. Not anger, not surprise, something quieter, sharper. When the elevator doors opened, the executive floor was already buzzing. Assistants pacing with tablets, phones ringing, glass-walled offices gleaming under soft lights. Rachel led the way. "This will be your office," she said, opening the double glass doors at the end of the hallway. "It's all ready. I'll bring the orientation schedule in a few minutes." "Thank you." She lingered for a second, then stepped out. The doors closed behind her. Malcolm Harris walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out below. Clean lines, sharp corners, people moving like dots. He placed the envelope on the desk. Didn't sit, just stood. The office felt untouched, like no one had ever really lived in it. A few framed certificates on the wall. A leather chair that hadn't been broken in. Someone had placed a small tray of pastries on the side table. He didn't reach for them. He looked down at the city again. He had expected a few challenges walking into this job. Culture shifts. Old board loyalties. Skepticism from shareholders. He hadn't expected a security guard at the front desk to decide he didn't belong in his own building. But he wasn't surprised. Not really. The knock on the door was soft. He turned. Rachel again. She stepped in, holding a folder. "I included the company briefing, org chart, and staff bios," she said. "Thanks." She hesitated. "I also noted the head of facilities, including front desk staff. In case you want to follow up." He didn't take the folder yet. Just looked at her. "Do you know how often that happens?" he asked, voice low. Rachel didn't pretend not to understand. "Too often," she said quietly. He nodded once, then took the folder. "Let's get started." Downstairs, Lewis sat stiffly at his desk. He hadn't moved much since the elevator doors closed. The monitor in front of him still displayed the visitor log screen, untouched. He replayed the moment again, Rachel calling him Mr. Harris, the words chief executive officer, the way Harris had looked at him. Calm, measured. Not a glare. Not smugness. Just knowing. The kind of look that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. Lewis leaned back in his chair, ran a hand over his mouth. He wasn't used to feeling off balance. Usually he called the shots down here, who entered, who waited, who was asked to step aside. This time he hadn't just misjudged someone. He'd misjudged the one person who now had the power to judge him. He looked around the empty lobby. No one to talk to. No one watching. But the silence wasn't comforting anymore. A younger guard, Mateo, came out from the back office with a breakfast sandwich in hand. "Everything good out here?" he asked casually. Lewis didn't answer right away. Then, new CEO came in earlier. Mateo raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Someone from corporate bring him through?" Lewis shook his head slowly. "No." He walked in alone. Mateo took a bite of his sandwich. "How do you know it was him?" Lewis didn't look up. "I didn't." By mid-morning, word had started to travel. Not officially. Not through emails or meetings. Just whispers, hallway conversations that stopped when doors opened, texts exchanged faster than eye contact. "You hear about the new CEO? Security gave him trouble downstairs." What kind of trouble? The kind people pretended not to understand. On the 14th floor, Malcolm Harris was sitting at the conference table with Rachel and 3 department heads. They were reviewing quarterly projections, upcoming restructuring proposals, and employee retention metrics. He listened closely. Took notes with a pen, not a laptop. Spoke little. When he did speak, it was quiet and precise. "We need to look beyond just who's producing results. I want to know how they're doing it. Who they're developing. Who they're listening to." The others nodded quickly, a little too quickly. One of them, Reed, head of marketing, added something about diversity initiatives, a line about recent hires, trying to stay on the right side of the moment. Malcolm gave a slight nod. Didn't smile. Didn't interrupt. But the air in the room shifted. People sat straighter. Chose their words more carefully. Rachel glanced over at him once, noticing how still he was again. Not cold. Just focused. Downstairs, Lewis watched the elevator numbers blink quietly. He hadn't seen Harris since that morning. He kept waiting to be summoned. Waiting for someone to come down and say he wants to speak with you. But no one did. And that was somehow worse. At 1 p.m., Malcolm Harris took the internal staircase down to the 13th floor. He could have asked someone to fetch what he needed. He could have had a manager handle it. But he preferred to see things for himself. Always had. He walked past open office spaces where employees sat in clusters. A few looked up as he passed, curious, uncertain, some whispering behind monitors. Most didn't recognize him. Yet, he stopped at the HR department. A receptionist stood as he entered. Young, maybe early 20s, eyes wide. "Can I help you?" "I need to see the onboarding protocols," Malcolm said. "Specifically how new executives are introduced to facilities and security." She blinked. I'll get Ms. Peters." He nodded. A minute later, Janine Peters, head of HR, emerged from her glass-walled office, face already trying to mask nerves. "Mr. Harris," she said. "Was there a problem?" "Nothing unmanageable," he said. "I'd just like to understand the process." "Of course. We usually notify security the day before, confirm access levels, assign a liaison from admin." "Was that done yesterday?" Janine hesitated. "We emailed facilities, CC'd the front desk. But I didn't call to confirm personally." Malcolm didn't react, just looked at her. "I'd like that to be standard moving forward. For all employees, not just executives." She nodded quickly. "Understood." He looked past her toward the wall of staff photos, diverse in theory, curated in practice. "Also," he added, "I want to review all front desk training materials. I want to understand the tone they're being taught, not just the rules." Janine swallowed. "Yes, sir." He turned to leave. Stopped. "I'm not asking for punishment," he said without turning back. "I'm asking for recognition of what we assume when no one tells us who someone is." Then he walked out. Rachel met him by the elevator just after 2 p.m. holding a slim stack of folders. "There's press next week," she said. "They're requesting a headshot and a brief statement about your leadership philosophy. Something for the quarterly bulletin." Malcolm took the folders, nodded. "I'll send something by tomorrow." They stepped into the elevator together. As the doors closed, she turned slightly toward him. "Just so you know," she said, voice quieter now, "Lewis has been here 13 years. Most people don't question him. He runs this lobby like it's his house." Malcolm didn't respond right away. "Then, that's the problem." Rachel gave a small nod. "Do you want to speak with him directly?" He looked ahead at the closed elevator doors. "No," he said, then added, "Not yet." The elevator reached the 14th floor. The doors slid open. Rachel stayed behind as Malcolm stepped out. When the doors closed again, she leaned against the elevator wall and exhaled. Downstairs, Lewis was still at his post. Still hadn't been called up. Still waiting. And everyone who passed by could feel it on him, the tension in his posture, the tight way he greeted people, the silence after. No one said anything. But they noticed. It was only a matter of time now. The next morning, Lewis came in 10 minutes early. Pressed uniform. Clean shave. Even brought a thermos instead of his usual gas station coffee. He sat behind the desk a little straighter, nodded a little quicker to each person walking in. But none of it erased what had already happened. By 8:15, his supervisor, Carl, came down. Mid-40s, quiet, usually friendly. But this morning he looked tight-jawed. "We need to talk," he said. Lewis followed him to the small office tucked behind the front desk, a space mostly used for inventory logs and shift changes. Carl closed the door behind them. "Corporates asked for a review of front desk protocols," he said. Lewis nodded slowly. Figured they might. Carl pulled a chair out and sat across from him. "There's going to be some retraining. Not just you, whole team. Right? But there's also going to be a memo," Carl added. "From upstairs. Mr. Harris wants something distributed building-wide." Lewis's brow furrowed. "A memo about?" Carl hesitated, then handed him a printout. Lewis read the heading. "Presence, Assumption, and Accountability, Notes from the CEO." He read the first line. "When I entered this building on my first day, I did so without introduction. What happened next wasn't about me. It was about what we see and don't see when we're not told someone's title." Lewis kept reading. And with every line, the room felt smaller. By midday, the memo had made its way into inboxes across all departments. Subject line, "A message from Malcolm Harris, CEO." Some skimmed it. Some read it twice. Others printed it out and pinned it near their desks like they needed the reminder in paper form. Upstairs, department heads paused their meetings to discuss it quietly. Downstairs, Lewis read it again during his break. He sat in the small kitchenette behind the lobby, coffee growing cold beside him. The words wouldn't leave his head. "The question isn't whether we misjudge someone. The question is, why did we feel entitled to judge in the first place?" He rubbed his temple. It wasn't just that he'd gotten it wrong. It was how certain he'd been. How quick. How easy it had been to place someone in a category without asking a single question. When he returned to the front desk, Matteo gave him a small look. Not pity. Not smugness. Just recognition. "You okay?" Matteo asked. Lewis nodded. "Yeah." But his voice didn't carry the same weight it used to. And for the rest of the day, he sat a little quieter, greeted people with a pause he hadn't had before. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. Later that afternoon, Malcolm Harris stepped out of a strategy meeting on the 15th floor. He walked past the executive assistants, who now greeted him with subtle nods and longer glances. Not just out of respect, but curiosity. They were still figuring him out. He didn't speak much in meetings. But when he did, people stopped typing. Back in his office, Rachel was waiting. "Facilities sent the updated training packet," she said, setting a thin binder on his desk. "And HR finished the review of desk conduct complaints from the last 2 years. Most are minor. Nothing on file about Lewis." Malcolm didn't look surprised. That's the pattern, he said. It's not always a reportable offense. Rachel nodded. But it leaves an impression. Exactly. He flipped through the binder without sitting down. Are people talking? He asked. Yes, she said. Some are defensive. Some embarrassed. But most quiet. He closed the binder. I don't want an apology. Rachel looked up. He continued, what I want is for the next person who walks through those doors, someone quiet, unknown, overlooked. I want them to be seen. Not scanned. Not sized up. Seen. Rachel's voice was soft. Then they will be. He nodded once. I'll hold you to that. 2 days later, a new hire arrived at the building. Young woman. Early 20s. Brown skin, nervous smile, holding a canvas tote bag and a printed offer letter. She walked through the glass door slowly, pausing at the front desk. Lewis looked up. This time he stood to greet her. Good morning, he said. Can I help you? She hesitated. I'm starting today. Marketing department. First day. Lewis didn't ask for proof right away. He didn't scan her clothes, didn't squint at her bag. He just nodded. Welcome, he said. You're in good hands. Take the elevator to 11. Ask for Jenna when you get there. The young woman smiled, relief softening her face. Thank you. Lewis sat back down after she left, exhaling slowly. It was the smallest thing, but it stayed with him all morning. Because for once, he hadn't tried to figure her out. He had just let her be. Upstairs, in the HR office, Janine Peters updated the orientation presentation. She added a new slide after company values. It read, how we treat the unfamiliar defines who we really are. No bullet points. No branding. Just the sentence. And silence. Later that day, she brought the draft to Rachel for review. Rachel read it once, then looked at her. He'll like that. Janine nodded. It's not for him. It's for everyone who thinks they already get it. Rachel didn't respond at first. Then quietly, he'd say that's the same thing. Janine smiled faintly. Maybe. By the end of the day, the new orientation packet was approved. No announcements. No press release. Just a quiet shift inserted where future employees would see it before they learned anyone's title. That evening, as most of the building emptied out, Malcolm stayed behind. His office lights were dimmed. He wasn't reading. Wasn't typing. Just thinking. He stood by the window, looking out at the city, arms crossed loosely, the sky outside beginning to dim into that bluish gray that comes just before dusk. There were no celebrations. No, we did it moments. Because that wasn't the point. This wasn't a victory, it was a beginning. A shift in rhythm. One that wouldn't show up on performance charts but would echo in the pauses before people spoke. In the eyes that lingered a moment longer to really see someone. In the restraints someone like Lewis might carry now, not because he was afraid, but because he'd learned. Malcolm turned from the window, grabbed his coat, and headed to the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection calm, still, ordinary. Exactly the way it needed to be. The next morning, the lobby felt different. Nothing obvious. No banners. No security overhaul. But people noticed. The way Lewis greeted visitors with intention now, not just habit. The way coworkers held eye contact just a little longer with those they didn't recognize. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't even about Malcolm anymore. It was about what he left uncovered. The kind of truth that didn't need shouting to be heard. Mid-morning, Lewis stepped outside for a break. Just 10 minutes, same as always. He stood near the edge of the sidewalk, sipping coffee, watching traffic ease past. Mateo joined him after a minute, holding a croissant wrapped in paper. They stood quietly for a bit. Then Lewis said, I didn't know who he was. But that's not the part that bothers me. Mateo looked over. What does? I didn't care who he could have been, Lewis said. That's the part that sticks. Mateo didn't say anything right away. Then quietly, you see it now. Lewis nodded. I do. 2 weeks later, Malcolm walked through the front doors again. No escort, no announcement, just like the first day. But this time, Lewis stood before he even reached the desk. Good morning, Mr. Harris, he said, voice steady. Welcome back. Malcolm paused. Nodded once. Thank you, Lewis. No tension. No edge. Just a quiet moment exchanged between two men who now understood something neither had said out loud. Malcolm moved toward the elevators. Behind him, Lewis sat back down. He didn't need a second chance to get it perfect. He just needed the first one to mean something. Across the lobby, a young intern watched the interaction. She leaned over to her colleague and whispered, who was that? The colleague replied, that's the CEO. The intern blinked. He didn't look like one. The colleague shrugged, then said, almost absently, they never do until you see them. And for the rest of the day, the lobby stayed still but alert. Not with fear. With awareness. A quiet kind of progress. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but changes everything anyway.